Welcome to Flow with Recess, a podcast to help you unlock your best self. Join Chief Psychology Officer of Recess, Matt Swartz, and our CEO, Kelz Bethel, your hosts on this journey to flow.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 5th episode of the Flow with Recess podcast. I'm Matt Swartz.
And I'm Kelz.
And we're happy to have you here with us today. Episode 5 is Imposter Syndrome. What is Imposter Syndrome? How does it work? Why does it suck? What can we do about it? We're here to talk about Imposter Syndrome.
Yeah.
So, as we do, we'll start off by defining what we mean, right, by Imposter Syndrome. So I'll give you the basic, most helpful definition, and then we'll talk about how Recess sees Imposter Syndrome. Fundamentally, Imposter Syndrome is that feeling where you're supposed to do something or perform or achieve or follow through, and you just feel like a fraud. You feel like everybody around you has it all figured out, and you have no idea what you're doing. Or, that you've risen to this level where everybody thinks you know what you're doing and you don't. Or, you feel not good enough, or like you need to wear a mask in order for other people to like you or approve of you. Does that fit your experience of Imposter Syndrome, Kelz?
Yeah, definitely. For me, we speak about a lot, imposter syndrome a lot as like women specifically, typically. And it definitely has that same experience for me. Like when I think about what imposter syndrome is, and people's experience of it is exactly that. Like, why is it that we may have a certain level of achievement, but still you feel sort of like, but do I know what I'm doing? Like, am I really, Yeah.
And is that, what you're saying is I have this level of achievement, but I don't feel right. So it's like you've earned the money, but you can't deposit it in the bank.
Yeah.
It won't stick. It keeps falling off. And so then people end up chasing more and more achievement, more and more outcomes, right? Mm-hmm. And it still doesn't change the feeling, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So from the Recess standpoint, when we're thinking about our 5 factors of flow, and if you guys need a little more explanation, continue through the podcast, we'll discuss it more deeply. But there's a mismatch between 2 fundamental cores of those 5 flow factors, right? Purpose, who am I? What's unique about me? What am I trying to accomplish? Where am I trying to go? And potential. Am I capable? Am I worthy? Do people like me? Right? And fundamentally what's happened is we've built up purpose without building up the foundation of potential. What does that mean? I've accomplished my goals. I know where I'm going. I know it's important to me, but I don't feel good enough. I don't feel like I should be here. I don't feel like I deserve to be here. I feel like other people deserve this more than I should, right? So that's what I've achieved or what I'm going to achieve, my upcoming goals, do not match my sense of worth or my sense of internal value.
I think that's so interesting, Matt, when we think about for particular people like us who are high performers and super achievement oriented, it's almost like that state of imposter syndrome also fuels us for some of our achievements. So I think that's why so many people resonate with that, because it's almost like we are chasing this feeling of achievement to sort of fill that bucket of worth.
I don't know why, but you're making me, I'm talking about this and think about this is kind of making me tear up, because I think what you just said is an insight for me in terms of, so I know this because I've been doing my trauma work, right? Like I just have this crummy relationship with myself, right? But I have all of these achievements, right? And I've spent all of this time accomplishing all of these things and doing all of this stuff. And, deep down, I'm still not convinced I'm worthy.
Yeah.
And I'm working on that. Yeah. And it's better than it was. But I want to wake up in the morning knowing that I'm good enough, right? That I don't have to do anything today to be better.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. Honestly, Matt, completely resonate with it as well. It's it's sort of this, I think this conversation around imposter syndrome, people may not even know what is the name for that experience. So many
Right.
of us are in that space where we are fighting and we are pushing through, but we don't feel with it. And as a matter of fact, the reason that we are pushing through is because we don't feel
Right.
worthy. We're
Absolutely.
overcompensating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, then the psychologist in me goes, okay, but where did that come from? Right?
Yeah.
Why are we fucked up? Right? Well, lots of, but I think there are a couple of different key things here that we can think about when we look at this dynamic, this imposter syndrome, right? The first one that I think is the most obvious and often the most helpful to people is that we have successfully worn masks. What does that mean? Okay, we put on these personas or these masks in order to get what we want. We get success or love from these, and then we keep wearing them. Okay, tangible example. I go in for an interview for a job. I put on the face that I think they want to see. I get the job. And now I have to keep being that person or keep doing that thing, because if they find out I'm a fraud, they'll fire me, right?
Yeah.
Or say I'm dating somebody new and I'm trying to make them impressed with me. And then as time goes on, I become more and more worried they're going to find out that I'm not everything that I was trying to pretend I was. And not even like I was trying to pretend I was, but I was featuring particular things and leaving out other things,
Yeah.
right? But on some level, wearing masks, whether it was with our parents or at school, right, benefited us. So we kept doing it.
Yeah, you know what's interesting that I'm thinking about, Matt, and I don't know if this is going to derail the conversation a bit, but I was listening to this interview, and just being the devil's advocate, I know like a lot of people think, but is that wrong? What's so wrong about that? Some people believe that, I know a lot of people listening may be like, yeah, but isn't that life? Isn't that, how life should be? Do we not have to wear masks? Do we not have to fit ourselves in particular molds? And
That's all. There's a whole nother podcast, I think,
so
right? But no, but this is good, right? I am an optimist.
Mhm.
I think an idealist is probably a better word. I'm an idealist. I think I can safely say that. So I had an experience. Where I'm going to share it on the podcast.
Yeah.
I'm going to share it on the podcast for authenticity, right? So me and my wife got pregnant a little earlier than we planned.
Yeah.
And I had an experience where I had somebody call me and tell me that they'd heard about this and they were no longer going to send me referrals as a therapist because I wasn't living their values, right? And I think it was in that moment where I had already been working on this whole question of, the masks versus not, whatever. I think it was that experience where I said, no, because I'm just building up this unsustainable creation, right? And then when a hole gets poked in it, something goes wrong. It's not sustainable because it doesn't match. It's plasticine. It's fake to some level, and versus something that's organic, and it may be slower, but it's more solid, and it's not as, you can't poke it and have it pop as easily. I don't know. I'm being but.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's not Jenga. It's not that volatile. That one slight disruption, the whole thing could go crumbling down. And I think what is interesting in what you're saying with that experience that you had is that there comes a time in your journey where you realize that it's not sustainable. So it may work for a while, but there comes a time where it just comes crashing down.
And that's my answer. I don't think there's anything wrong with fake it till you make it. I don't think there's anything wrong with going into the situation and figuring out what other people need and doing it. But sooner or later, you're going to get exhausted. It may be a great short-term answer to get you out of survival and into something more sustainable. but you can't spend the entirety of your life being a fake product. And then, we can talk about the cultural influence of this, right? We're taught about branding, and we're taught about, if your brand is separate from who you are, the divide's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. My personal brand, right? Like, versus, no, my personal brand is who I am. And, it just falls off me like apples off a tree, right? And then that's a lot more sustainable.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, definitely.
A mask is a tool. There's nothing wrong with using a hammer. Okay. But if you make your entire life about hammers, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
Are you going to be the guy that, from then on, you can only go to different job sites only using hammers. And if somebody needs a screwdriver, you're out of there.
Yeah. And I think what is really interesting in terms of what you were speaking about before is that it's wearing a mask could be a conduit for, as you say, you're in survival, you're trying to get out of a particular position. But when we start to do the internal work, am I wearing this mask because I feel unworthy? Am I doing this as a tool, or am I doing it because I don't feel like I'm worthy, or I don't feel like I'm good enough?
Is it an old pattern,
yes.
right? And you can go through, there are these different models of individual and cultural development, right? Where, it's actually necessary to integrate with your external environment before you integrate fully with yourself, right? That there's these different reasons why it's a natural part of child development to go, okay, what do my friends think of me, right? Like, that's super important, but who am I, right? And just trying to find the balance. And I think in our culture, even though we have this individualist culture, I think our culture tends towards, and I'm talking about American culture, I'm sorry, I say ours, and that's not fair because that's not necessarily yours, Kelz.
Yeah.
But, in American culture, there's this, rugged individualism thing, but it's rugged individualism until it inconveniences somebody who has more power than you. And then you need to be who you need to be in order to make that person happy, right? So rugged individualism for the strongest, and, imposter syndrome and masks for the rest of you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I tangented. So
the tangent.
Successfully wearing masks is one area where that imposter syndrome can develop. Second area, it has to do with our self-image. And our self-image is what we could call that identity. It's fundamentally the story we've created about who we are that's founded in our past beliefs, our early childhood experiences. And one of the keys there is our early experiences of shame. And we're talking before the age of 5 to 8, right? Is all of the times where I've been told it's my fault I'm in pain, or it's my fault somebody else is upset at me. And the more that shame comes on, the more we disconnect from what I might call our authentic self, right? The more we become used to being what other people need us to be, because we don't want to feel that shame feeling, and nobody teaches us how to process that shame feeling, right? I always get this feedback from parents like, well, I can't not correct my children. No. Absolutely, right? There are going to be times where you need to use guilt and shame to condition your children. But you can be intentional about when and how you're doing it, and you can educate them on how to process the feeling. That's it. Yeah. Yep. I know it really hurts when mommy and daddy get upset at you. Right. And then we learn to work through that. So shame is a natural and normal part of human development. It's when we don't learn how to process it successfully that it becomes a problem. And then that shame becomes our self-image. I'm not good enough. I have to do X, Y, and Z to make people like me. That's who I am. Item number 3, right? So mask, self-image. Item number 3, self-esteem. Okay, this is different than self-image. Self-image is who we believe we are, this story. Self-esteem is our relationship with ourselves. That's what I was kind of alluding to earlier, right? You can have a really awesome self-image, but not that good self-esteem.
Makes sense.
Right? I need to be this thing in order for people to like me, and I'm really good at being this thing, and it works until something comes crashing down, and then I don't have the relationship with myself to support that. So the relationship with myself is the relationship between my performative self, my authentic self, the relationship between my awareness and my inner child. There's different ways to talk about this, but fundamentally it's how deeply in love am I with myself?
Yeah, yeah. I resonate so much with that. I feel like I've had that experience now. Like I feel like I'm somewhere in that space, but I guess we could talk about that a little bit later. Like I feel like
Okay.
during the pandemic, I had that crashing down moment, I think, a lot because I think I was very comfortable with myself, with my self-image. I was very comfortable with who I was externally. But when that sort of crash started to happen and things, I wasn't able to hold on to things externally as I would have, typically, I was only stuck with realizing certain things about myself. And it quickly brought up the fact that I was holding on to a particular self image and identity. But was I really in love with myself? Did I feel worthy? And the more and more things started to happen is the more and more I realized that no, Kelly, there is something there, there's something that there's something there. There's a big gap in terms of your self-esteem. And the thing about it is that I never realized that because I thought I was super confident. I thought I had all the SD. I thought I was super confident.
And that can be true. You can be confident and self-esteem are different
Right.
things.
Yeah.
So I say this all the time. I say when I do these presentations on
Yeah.
people and self-image and all this, I start with, here's confidence. You know what confidence is, right? Guess what? Anybody can fake confidence.
True.
The used car salesman, right? Mr. Slimy, he's confident, but you can feel there's an emptiness inside that, right? And I'm not saying you feel like a used car salesman, but that's just a prototypical example of confidence, no self-esteem.
Yeah.
Right. And confidence is, how do I present myself vis-a-vis the people that are in front of me, which can come from self-esteem, or it can come from a mask.
Yeah.
Right. I've grown and I've empowered this mask and people love this mask and I'm going to put on this mask and I know it works really well until somebody doesn't like the mask, and then whatever's behind it, well, they certainly don't like that, and now I'm stuck. Right.
Yeah.
I think you are not the only person during COVID who has been face to face with okay, well, now I can't totally engage with the thing I built up externally, and now I'm noticing the gap between what I built up and who I am, and I don't know how to bridge that because nobody ever taught me to, because that's not what we talk about, right?
Yeah.
Which leads into a last item where it comes from, item number 4, right? So we've got the mask, we've got self-image, we've got self-esteem, and finally is the difference between value and worth, right? So we are taught to get value from positive feedback from other people, different than worth, right? Value has to do with approval, getting approval from others, which comes from our need to survive. We're tribal creatures. Our tribal brain says, I need the people in my tribe to like me so I don't get kicked out. If I get kicked out, I die, right? And so guilt as a mechanism is what keeps us in the tribe. Oh, I messed up. They're upset at me. I'm sorry. Please take me back. Guilt, apology, repair, back into the tribe, right? If I don't have guilt, if I don't respond to that guilt, then I get kicked out of tribe. I die. You didn't survive, right? So having that social value, what do people think of me? What's my place? That's a survival thing, right? But what that teaches us is that safety is equal to smallness. It's equal to contraction, right? If I'm not, oh gosh, I got to be safe. Well, right. And that can be, I'm not, I got to play small, or that can be, I got to fit in this little mask or this little box. Right. But fundamentally, safety isn't big and expansive like this. Safety is small and constricting, right? Which works until you're a leader. And then once you want to become a leader, either you hack that tribal brain or you're screwed. Right. So we're talking about, those of us, entrepreneurship is evolving out of a follower into a leader over the course of one's life or through one's, genetic, maybe as a couple generations. Right. But we're going from farmers, peasant people, merchants, laborers to, no, I want to be in charge. Right. Look, the people that are in charge that have the leadership brains, them. They are different than us. They're in control. They're different, right?
Yeah.
We're not, I'm not going to become a sociopath overnight. Okay. So it's not about that, but it's about breaking out of that idea that I need to be small in order to be safe. If you need to be small in order to be safe, you're not going to be a leader.
True.
Leaders grow, they expand, they influence, right? And I'm not saying you can't be a patient, self-contained leader, but there's still, safety isn't, as a leader, safety is, how do I find safety in taking risks? How do I find safety in being myself? How do I find safety in encouraging other people to do the same thing? So we have to break out of that conditioning. And in order to do that, we move from social value to self-worth, right? And self-worth, which is again different than self-image or different than self-esteem. Self-worth is I am good no matter what. Right? We can't necessarily grow worth. We can discover it. We can deepen it, right? But it's already there. You're either in touch with your worth or you're not, but it just is. Self-esteem, you can grow. How's that relationship? Self-worth, there's nothing you can do to be more or less valuable. You just are worthy, right? This thought exercise, look at a 2-year-old. Is that 2-year-old worthy?
Yeah.
Of course, right? What do they do? Nothing.
Yeah.
Right? In fact, they can throw something and you're still going to go, oh, look at that. Right? But what happened? I turned 13 and suddenly I'm throwing shit and people don't like me anymore? Well, come on. What happened? Right? But we've lost that sense of worth. It's somewhere along the line and we tip into social value. So for most people, and we'll get to this, it's unwinding that social value and putting more energy into self-worth. Doesn't mean we won't be aware of what other people are thinking. Doesn't mean we don't adapt to what other people might think or might ask of us, but we don't source our value from their feedback because we recognize that their feedback comes from their experience and their pain and all of those things.
Want to get even deeper into flow? Learn more about today's episode on our blog, The Science of Productivity. Find out more about today's topic by visiting our blog, Imposter Syndrome at Work, Overcoming Self-Doubt. Here, you'll learn more insights and tips on how you can maintain your flow state every day.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I think super profound. I feel like I just had a good therapy session. Thank you.
So with soft transition. Tell me about your personal experiences with imposter syndrome. What are some things you've gone through that I think a lot of people listening can identify with?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot. So I could pull on, I had some things that I was thinking about before this recording, but what I can say is that I have recognized in this current moment that I live in that space. And so I've been trying to do the work to sort of build that internal feeling of worth, right? But what I've noticed is that this problem is a fundamental problem for me. This is a fundamental problem, and it affects me from relationships to work to all sorts of things. But what I would say is that what I have noticed for myself is that, particularly in terms of let's say business and entrepreneurship and so forth, I've realized a certain few things about myself. For example, being building Recess, for example, and trying to be a leader and build this thing that we want to grow exponentially. I realized that with myself, there is a time as a woman, as a person of color, also from being from the Caribbean and of itself, and feeling this sense of smallness, I tend to almost overcompensate a lot. So I would think that, we spoke about this, Matt, where, I think I have to go to the best school right now. So I feel like, I got into these MBA programs. I'm going to have to go to Oxford. I'm going to have to do these things because this is going to make me feel like.
Ooh, feel that energy. You feel that?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so I realized that a lot of the things and a lot of the ways that I sort of present myself it's coming from a place of just imposter syndrome. I don't feel good. Even though I'm functioning, I'm not in a position where internally I feel worthy. I feel like I still have something to do. I still have something to prove. I still need to do something to feel better.
So, and to make this really simple, you use one of our hot words, smallness, right? You're covering up smallness with achievement or whatever, right? And there's a difference between covering up smallness with a mask and working through smallness to heal it or release it, right? To integrate it, right? But I'm going to suggest that this is one of the core issues that every single human being faces. And the question is, are you aware of it or not? Are your defense mechanisms so effective that they're protecting you? As I'm even talking to you about this, you go, well, that's not me. I have a great self-esteem. I have good sense of worth, right? And you think you do, but those are partially, and I don't want to make everybody feel like super, it's a continuum, right? Like they're some people are higher on that worth and some people are lower on that worth, but I still have yet to meet a single human being that there isn't a disconnect between their performative self and their self-worth. And that is a journey I think everybody needs to go on and needs to take, including myself. It's one I've been on for a little bit of time, that's for certain. So I think I just wanted to take that opportunity, Kelz, that I'm going to go to this school and I'm going to continue to cover up my smallness. I'm going to put another achievement. I'm thinking like a hermit crab, right? I'm going to put more shiny shit on my shell instead of realizing the shell is too small and it's time to move
out. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I like that.
I am no longer that small self that I thought I was that helped keep me safe. I'm something more than that.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's funny. I mean, just Yvonne, so that is one example of things that I do with the shiny objects. But it's funny because just also outside of like a productive self, I realized as we're talking here, this is going to be completely just a different conversation. But I even realized in relationships. So I realized that before choosing a relationship that was completely unhealthy, but I thought it was like an attractive, like I needed to have this thing so that I could feel okay, like I could feel, good or whatever. So I've noticed that there are several elements in different spaces and places in my life where I kept putting these shiny things on top of the shell because I feel unworthy and I feel stuck in this small space.
Maybe somebody else will make me feel
exactly
right. Now if I can just go down this rabbit hole for a second and then pull out, immediately you move into objectification. You're not really in a relationship. You have objectified this person consciously or subconsciously, right? Relationship means authentic connection with the other person's needs and your willingness to sacrifice for each other, right? A partnership, an intimate partner relationship, even a friendship, right? But if I'm in a relationship based on what I can get out of it, that's not a relationship. That's objectification. And again, culturally, we've been taught to do that because that's what everybody,
Yeah, exactly. No, it's true. And it's interesting that sometimes, it's one of those things that if you're not conscious of yourself, you don't even realize the patterns and habits that you continue to do.
Totally.
So what about you, Matt? Like, what is your experience? Like, share something for yourself that is a story for your imposter syndrome.
Yeah, well, I think... I'm interested because I'm looking at the examples I put down, and after we've gotten a little deeper, maybe I want to, but I'll start with what I put down, right? So, when I was building my private practice when I was 24, I would walk into these rooms with all of these quote unquote adults, right? And it would be, I sort of saw myself as a kid and saw these people as an adult, and how can I make them like me? How can I impress them? How can I da da da? And when I look back on that period, man, I did that really well. I was really good at it. I mean, by the end, I had, if I went into one of those, I had this weekly networking thing. I would come in and you'd give testimonials. Like if I presented, people would give, a third of the room would go, "Oh, Matt is so helpful. Oh, he's so amazing. Oh, he's so," and I was successful, right? But I still felt like they were adults and I was a child. And until I did some of the internal work, that really didn't change, right? Or, more recently doing more, recently past couple 2-3 years, right, interacting with more and more sort of leaders and high performing clients, and how that manifested for me was, oh my God, I got to do this right or I'll lose them, right? Because if I lose them, then I'm not good enough, and number two, I'm not safe because I'm not getting their money anymore, right? So but again, objectification, right? So they're not really they're a client, objectification rather than a person. And if they're not ready for me, or I can't help them, or they need to go somebody else, that's okay. I recently had this experience where there was somebody like that who I, just wasn't ready. And oh my God, I dealt with it so much better than I would have even a year ago. It was just like, yeah, they're not the client for me. Like they don't get me. They don't, they don't want to form a relationship with me. They just transactional. Like, yeah, it's not the right client for me, right? Meanwhile, pull up the waiting list. I had a client who waited 3 months for me. So those are the clients I want, right? The people who are ready to invest in the relationship. And then, but on a higher level, right? Because we're getting deep. I think this is what I was taught. I mean, I think my parents taught me, you need to go and be this character. And I don't think they meant to.
Yeah.
I think it was just what they'd done. It was the best that you need to go be this thing and get these things. And and in private, they would say, oh, Matt, you're so amazing. And not just public, private. And, I got messages. And I think this is why I can do this work, is because sometimes I did get messages of you're valuable no matter what. I got those messages. There are people who never get those messages. And oh man, the work is much harder for those people, right? I got those messages. I love you. You're perfect. You're beautiful. Just be yourself. It's okay if they don't understand you. Go find a different friend, whatever. But then also there was a lot of messaging regarding my ADHD and my ability to fit in at school, or my ability to get a good, get good grades so I could get a good job, so I can, So I think it's just that kind of mixed messaging. And then, but if the masks work, then you ride with it. And that's, I think, most high performers and leaders, they ride with it. Whereas the people who can't make the masks work, they get stuck, they get trapped, they get, they're working landscaping, or, they get stuck somewhere, and then we push through, but then later we might want to revisit, what we're doing.
Yeah.
And then we're trying to focus on, how this might show up at work for a team, right? And the last experience I would share is trying to shield myself from these feelings of incapability when I was, sitting with, or, my experienced colleagues, right? By wanting to be the best at everything. They do that. Oh, I could do that.
Yeah.
Oh, they could do that. I could do that. I could do, trying to be everything to everybody, when in reality, I had specific skill sets and I wanted to grow other skill sets, but I had to leap immediately from I don't know to I'm really good at this thing, because I was uncomfortable with the middle ground feeling of I'm not sure I'm the best at this.
Yeah, that is interesting. I like that. I like that example as well, because I feel like a lot of people could resonate with that as well. For me, in terms of a team, I remember in my previous company, I had one, like a team member, and we would also always talk about what is the vision, like what are we going to do, where are we going to be in 5 years, in 10 years. And this team member would always sort of shrink what we're doing. He would always bring it back down to sort of facilitate his, I guess, where he saw himself, right? And that is sort of like a bigger outcome of what was happening. But in our everyday space, he was always he was always pushing through to be the highest achiever, to be the most diligent, to get all his goals, all his checklists. But then when we're speaking about the vision and what we're doing, he always brought it down. So he kind of brought down everybody's vision and direction with him, So I found, yeah.
And again, this is probably a whole nother conversation, but you open the door, so I'm going to poke my head in and run out again. Right? What I have come to believe is a fundamental truth is that an organization can only be as healthy as its key players.
Yeah.
And there certainly, I'm not saying the organization can only be as healthy as the receptionist. Maybe your receptionist is a really key player and they need to be healthy. But definitely the core leadership team, definitely core management, right? So you have a couple of options. The first is only hire healthy people. Good luck. And the second, good luck. I wish you the best, but you may hire a bunch of masks that look healthy, right? The second option is, even what we were talking about last time, right? Creating a culture of authenticity.
Yeah.
And part of that culture of authenticity is the ongoing collaborative experience of healing and growth.
Yeah.
What if we can make that part of a company culture? Right. And we've done that and it's working so far. And, and I've seen that in other companies and it works really good. It's a little messy and sometimes things don't move as fast, but they're more organic and sustainable than things that move fast artificially. Right. So I think we wanted to talk about, from a recess understanding, right, how imposter syndrome and flow interact with each other. And, I think we already kind of alluded to this, what I'll call the purpose and potential access, right, which is like, how high is my purpose versus how high is my potential, right? And when one of those is outsized from the other, that's when we tend to experience that imposter syndrome. Right. And imposter syndrome is going to bring us out of the flow. It's going to make us feel not good enough. It's going to make us feel, it's going to really activate that potential area. And if that potential area, think of it like this, there's a toll booth you pass through and the toll booth says, I need 5 potential points, please. And thank you. Right. And if you don't have those 5 potential points to give, then you're out of flow.
Yeah.
Right. And what does that look like? That looks like I've done this in the past. I know I'm capable of learning more, even if I don't know how to do it. I am good enough person, whether I succeed or fail. When we look at recess in terms of bilateral for building potential or building skill, recess can't build your skill, but it can make you feel better about the skill you have. And it can make you feel better about the fact that you may mess up. It's okay to learn, right? It's okay to not be perfect at all of this. You're worthy whether or not you achieve this goal. So, I think that's a really important component, right? So how do we increase flow in that potential area, right? Well, we talked about some of these, but just to make it quick and dirty, grow your self-esteem and deepen your worth, right? Self-esteem is that relationship with yourself, build that relationship with yourself and deepen the access or the remembering of your worth, which is no matter how this turns out, you're valuable. Second, working to detach from social value and attach to worth, which is to say, recognizing there's value in the feedback you're getting from other people, but that the value might be limited, right? And that we shouldn't pin our entire sense of self on what other people think of us. There's a balance to be had, right? And then third, which may surprise you, is the value of connection and belonging. Okay. What does that mean? Well, it means you're not supposed to be good at everything. It means you're not supposed to be perfect. It means, in a company, I don't want to be the COO. Are you kidding me? It sounds like horrible. All that energy you just went to put everything in the CRM. Oh my God, that sounds horrible. That's horrible, right? You do that. I'll yell at people. We each have our strengths, right? So, the value of connection, right? Being able to say, hey, I don't have to be good at everything, but then also, I can bring in other people to aid me, but then also the value of belonging, which is, have I found rooms and groups and communities where I can be authentically myself? And if not, of course, it's going to be hard out there, right? So you've got to balance these things. Like, yeah, worth is important, but if you haven't found a place where you can be yourself, then it's just going to feel fake, right? So we need to balance these different things.
Yeah. So, That's good, Matt. I think now we're going into, what are some of the tips for finding flow? Like what do I do in this moment to try to keep myself in flow for imposter syndrome? I think what I have been doing recently in terms of recognizing this within myself is that I have challenged myself to be authentic in situations, almost as a challenge, as a tool for my own building of my own self concept. So prior, I would continue wearing the mask, but now I have used me being authentic as saying, Kelly, it's okay. You're worthy, and so I'm using that to give myself the validation and the worth, because I'm realizing and building that by just using authenticity. And so I found that has been helping me even in terms of relationships, friendships, even, work relationships. It has really been helping me just by trying to be more authentic and more open. I have been feeling much better because I feel less like a fraud, because I am purposely putting myself out there in a more authentic way.
It's a practice. It's a skill.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, and, I always say, people, manifestation, The Secret, all of that. I always say, you don't attract what you think, you attract what you are. Right. So if you are authentic, you're going to attract relationships that match that authenticity, not in some weird woo woo, just like, oh, she's authentic. I like that. That feels good to me. Right. But if you're masking, if you're walking around, you're going to attract other people who are masking too. You're going to end up in companies with people who are masked. I mean, it's going to be, the mask is going to follow you around. So I think it's awesome for you, awesome for the people around you. And hopefully you can, my hope would be is that continues to grow and becomes more natural. You'll continue to invite more people, and hopefully through this podcast and in other ways, into that experiment with you.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think the next thing for me is, because sometimes that feeling of smallness leads to the sense of anxiety sometimes, and also not being sure of where my behaviors and motives come from. So I think the next thing is just practicing simple mindfulness at times, like just stopping and checking in with myself in different times has been helpful for me. So it's just a mindfulness moment to check in has really helped me as well.
And the goal of that, Kelz, is identifying more and more with your conscious awareness rather than the character you've built around it.
Yeah.
I am the one checking in, not the one doing the thing.
Exactly.
Right? The one doing the thing is more like a suit or a set of clothes that I'm wearing. Right? I am the presence.
Yeah. Like that. What about you, Matt? What are some of the tips?
So challenging side and then positive side, right? So on the challenging side, gosh, Matt, broken record. Yep. Healing, right? Healing the guilt and the shame. Okay. What does that look like? Well, any emotional intelligence, right? Really 3 steps to emotional intelligence. Emotional awareness, which is being able to identify the feeling. Oh, this is guilt. Oh, this is shame, right? Being aware of the feeling. How does it feel in my body, right? Emotional communication. Can I articulate that to myself, which is part of that mindfulness? Can I articulate it to other people if I need to? And then third is the emotional regulation, working on dealing with that emotion in the moment and then working on that emotion over time, right? So, I'm just talking about building our emotional intelligence and specifically working on guilt and shame, which means working to feel and release trapped guilt and shame that's coming up in situations, rather than saying, oh, I'm always going to feel this way, right? If you notice the guilt and shame, see it not as inevitable, but rather an opportunity to heal, right? And then on the other side of that is, okay, if I'm emptying out the guilt and shame and there's some empty space, what do I want to put in this place? Well, that's where I deepen self-esteem and worth, right? Worth, the immutable value that I am, self-esteem, the relationship I have with myself between perhaps my awareness and that immutable value, or my awareness and my child self, or my full authentic self, or however you want to frame it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the last thing is really to say a tip for teams. If we have a team, what are some ways that we could counteract imposter syndrome within a team dynamic? And for us, in terms of just playing on what I said in terms of authenticity, it's about also creating that culture of authenticity within a team dynamic, where the leader also leads with that sense of vulnerability, so from the leadership side, and building that culture so that team members feel like they could be vulnerable, feel like they could be authentic. And so we build that culture around that.
Healthy and appropriate vulnerability, right? Which is not going to work as a leader and telling everybody about your sex life, right? Or what, right? Healthy and appropriate vulnerability is somebody's talking about a challenge and you're like, oh, I've been there. I know what that feels like, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about these topics and we're like, oh, I know this, or, I'm going to tell this story not everybody knows, or whatever, right? And you don't have to go big overnight, right? Start small, scale up. Allow vulnerability and authenticity to grow. Don't manufacture it, because authenticity or vulnerability can just be another mask if it's not authentic.
So
if
true.
it's not, organic, right? So it's okay. Okay, I've been wearing a lot of masks. Sure. Okay. Spend the next couple of years growing your authenticity. Don't expect to come in next week and have it all perfect, right? It's a process. So
yeah.
Well, Kelz, I think this has been a fantastic conversation, accidentally modeling some of that vulnerability ourselves. And I'm very hopeful that listeners will have heard something here that's valuable for them in terms of working on and healing that imposter syndrome feeling.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. This has been Flow with Recess, and we hope you'll tune in next time for our next podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, guys. Until next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Flow with Recess. By the way, your flow doesn't have to end here. Our Recess app helps listeners unlock their most productive selves by reducing anxiety and improving their focus. You can find out more about our app as well as more resources to support you on your journey by visiting our website withrecess.com. Links to our bilateral playlist and this week's blog post are also found in our show notes. Until next time, find your flow and get unstuck with Recess.